Rising in the ranks, but got pinched by the cops and went down for 17 years, not a peep. And Tony would have joined him had he not had a panic attack that day and slipped and fainted. Tony Uncle Johnny feels internal guilt over. He even does a hit for New York, something Tony Soprano told his crew to keep out of. When his former prison best buddy Angelo Guerrepe is whacked by the Leotardo brothers, Tony B goes off the reservation, shapeshifting into an animal and eating Billy Leotardo and injuring Uncle Philly. It causes a meltdown with this thing of ours. Johnny Sack wanting Tony B dead, the Sopranos crew frustrated with Tony protecting his cousin, and eventually Tony himself taking out Tony B to stop him getting tortured by New York. You can check out a video I did on whether Tony made the right call and whether he should have handled the situation differently. Today I wanted to propose a thesis that might cause a little dysentery among fans, but that is, quite simply, that Tony B is the worst main character in the show. And I mean that in multiple ways, from the depiction of the man by Steve Buscemi to the writing of the character.
I don't know. Fucking slanderous me.
Don't get me wrong, I love Buscemi, I love the character. I'm used to it by now and I don't want anything changed or retconned, and Tony B is very much part of the Sopranos universe. But initially, when I first watched it, and I looked online and I saw that I definitely wasn't the only one, but Tony B just seemed all off, and a really weird character.
Fucking weirdo, you ask me.
Firstly, there's the way he looks. He doesn't really look like an Italian-American ex-con Jersey mobster, not the way the other characters do. When they're all together, he sticks out, and not in a this guy was in the can for 17 years and his fashion is out of date kind of thing, well that too, but like Buscemi walked onto the wrong TV set. There's a hello fellow mobsters vibe about him. It's not Buscemi's fault, that's just the way he looks. He looks like a dork. He's goofy looking, and perhaps it's because of the actor's fame before even joining the show, but you always get a sense of, oh look, there's Steve Buscemi, rather than being engrossed into the character. He was just too famous and well known, and where other famous actors like Frank Vincent were brought in, but they already had reputations for playing mobsters, Buscemi was a huge profile actor but is known for playing comedic weirdos and creeps even when he's played gangsters. There's a scene where he's being offered a contract by Rusty and Angelo, and you never get a feel that this guy used to be a rising mob hitter. Some of the extras in the scene look more like professional criminal than he does. John Turturro might have been a better fit. I know Michael Madsen wanted to be on the show, maybe he could have been Tony B. But long story short, what we're told about Tony B doesn't match up to what we see. A dangerous, up-and-coming assassin, a young hitter for the mob who was a rising star, a dynamic duo with Tony Soprano. He went away for more than a decade, shaped in the can. He's out and he's unstable. He's got a problem with rage. He could go skits at any moment if you say the wrong thing. He rubs shoulders with legends like Feech LaManna and Angelo Guerrepe. He's a force to be utterly reckoned with.
Boy, are you fat.
Doesn't quite work, does it? There's a feeling I get from Tony B of a classic guest star appearance for a season on a sitcom. With everybody else, it feels like they're part of the family, and I know in a way it works because Tony B is an oddball who is reinserting his place into the family after many years, but it isn't just that, he just looks off. His performance is off-kilter, it's askew, and the accent doesn't help. Supposedly he grew up in Jersey like the rest of the guys, but he doesn't have the same accent. We're told he's really dangerous and can snap easily, but never get a sense of it. Buscemi just couldn't fucking sell it. It's like when he threatens the doctor saying, any gunshot wounds or broken kneecaps? It just doesn't sound scary. I was like, waiting for a punchline. Instead of intimidating, he comes across as a bit of a creep. He stares at Meadow a lot, for example, and it's obviously because he's thinking about his daughter. But he looks like a perv who wants to gnaw at her with his teeth. It seems Steve Buscemi was cast simply because everybody liked him. He of course was already part of the crew, directing episodes like the fan favourite Pine Barrens. Apparently they wanted to work with him, so the character of Tony B was written specifically for him. That makes it worse, because he's only in it because they liked him. And since the character was written for him, surely it should have just worked better. And plot-wise, the insertion of Tony Blundetto feels nonsensically shoehorned in. Let's go through some eye-raising story elements. So Tony B is Tony Soprano's long-lost cousin who he loves dearly and was so close to him, and yet he is never mentioned throughout the course of this show previously. No one ever visited him in the can, Tony and Com never brought him up at the dinner table, and it's especially unbelievable given we've had so much insight and exposure into Tony's childhood, his backstory, the panic attacks, his early criminal career. Surely, when he's talking to Dr. Milfy, he would have brought up his cousin somewhere, especially seeing as though the botched hijacking he missed due to a panic attack was such a vital part of his character. It's just too obvious that Blundetto was written later and they worked it backwards. Then, in order to give him 2 sons, they tell us that his able-bodied semen was smuggled out of the can and used to make the twins. That's really weird. And it's made all the more weird by the fact that Blundetto lasts a single season, his kids are such a small part of the story, and after he gets popped they're never brought up again, so it all feels pretty pointless. Then there's the fact that before he went in the can he already had a woman and a daughter, and oh, this daughter actually lived with the Sopranos in their own home. Again, she's never been mentioned before, but apparently she ran away from home and they tried searching for her but were never able to. Again, very strange how this has never been mentioned before. When Tony is telling Meadow about safety for young women in Europe when she wants to go there, that seemed the perfect opportunity to bring up that a young woman from their household disappeared after leaving home. Then you have the fact that Blundetto's trying to go straight. He could go back to being a mobster but chooses to have the working man's life. So what are the chances that a bag full of thousands of dollars cash lands right at his feet, him of all people, and then he spends it, gets a taste of the mob life, and wants back in? It's so convenient that some fans actually theorize that Tony Soprano staged this as some kind of master plan to get Blundetto back in the game, but that only speaks to how contrived people find this plot point. And then he punches Kim, and it really comes out of nowhere, when we've seen him go through a lot of frustrations, like when his van gets stolen. I mean, like really, the straw that broke the camel's back just happened to be when Tony B was just about to get his dream of the massage parlor, right at the last minute. They were going for the trying to go straight but pulled back into a life of crime arc, but it just felt unearned because it's like Blundetto went ahead and randomly thought, you know what, I can't be bothered. After putting in so much effort into his massage stuff, he even got a license by this point, which was the hardest part of all. Surely it would have been sometime when he's revising for that test that he would have went, fuck it, put me in, coach. It just doesn't quite work. Blundetto punching Kim and reneging on his wish simply happened because that's what the writers decided to happen in that moment. It didn't feel organic. It's one of several instances where Tony B does not act entirely logical for plot reasons, not character reasons, which would have been understandable. Like the hit on Joey Peeps is done because B needed money, but this is despite Tony S willing to offer him work and help him out. Why do something so stupid? An actual betrayal of Tony S. What, just because he liked Angelo? It might have worked better if Tony B was forced into the hit, like maybe he owed a debt or something because of something that happened in the can. Also, character dynamics are altered in ways that are confusing. All of a sudden it turns out that the 2 cousins would bully Christopher when he was younger, and it's something Chris is insecure about. In order to marry up the ages, the writers tell us that Tony and Chris are about 8 years apart, which seems bizarre and only seems to have been said to make the 3-way character dynamic work. People complain about the ages in The Many Saints of Newark between Christopher and Tony, but that actually makes more sense than what the writers told us in The Sopranos Season 5, which they only did seemingly to make Tony B work. What is Tony B about? Does he just want a quiet, innocent life? The ability to buy his boys Game Boys? Does he like the allure of the criminal life? Does he have a killer streak in him and that's what his true calling is? Is he refusing help from Tony and slaving under Kim so when he makes it he can say to himself he did it in an honest way? What's the driving factor behind this? A desire for a straight life? But now we're back to my first question. You just don't know what this guy's about. Then there's the awkward Feech Lamana thing. I don't fully blame the writers here because they were forced to write Feech out because the actor was having issues with his lines, but it was clear the show was making out Feech and Tony B to be really close in the can. Feech gives Tony B a startup, they drive around, all of that kind of stuff. Then it's rewritten so that Blundetto's best friend in the joint was actually Angelo Garepe, and we get awkward scenes like this where Angelo doesn't know who Tony Soprano's cousin is, but in the next line he says he was his best buddy, in a line that is so obviously ADR'd in.
Who's your cousin again?
Tony Blundetto.
Oh yeah, good guy, right. He was my best buddy inside.
Even the writers knew they screwed up with Tony Blundetto. You can see interviews where they said he was supposed to stick around for 2 seasons. But with what he did, they wrote themselves into a corner and knew that the only logical ending was that Blundetto had to die. The show brought in a completely new person who was never mentioned before, someone so important to Tony. Not to mention he's supposed to be really smart with an insanely high IQ that the nuns were raving about, and yet he makes many moronic decisions in the show. And then he is the catalyst for the New York-New Jersey conflict. It's a poor decision from the writers. How are you supposed to feel Tony's anguish about this situation when we just met the guy and it's becoming obvious that he exists simply to cause dysentery in the ranks and then exit the show? If someone like Christopher had killed a New York man and they wanted his head, that would have been completely different and way more emotional. We'd really feel Tony's desire not to give up his nephew because we've been with Christopher for several seasons. Speaking of dumb decisions, this guy does blunder after blunder. Maybe that's why they named him Blundetto. I just cannot get over the fact that he got the drop on the Leotardo twins and for no reason leaves Uncle Philly alive and doesn't finish the job. What stopped him? Seriously, why does he walk away? It's not the easiest thing to believe he'd go off the reservation and do a premeditated hit against the Leonardos in the first place, but leaving Phil alive is insanely stupid. And plus, why does his bloodlust stop after this and he goes into hiding? Phil is the senior of the brothers and one of the men who killed Angelo Guarepe. He's still alive, but for the sake of the plot, Blundetto thinks, yeah, at least I got Billy, and decides to call it a day and go into hiding instead of, continuing to go after Phil. Phil is walking around all deranged, threatening to put things up Tony's mother's box. It's the perfect time to hit him. Also, with the Peeps hit, the imbecilic moron gets his foot run over by a car being driven by a dead guy. And then knowing they're looking for a limping dude, what does he do? He goes limping around all over the place like Long John Silver, including to Peeps' own funeral. It's possible the series even acknowledged itself how Tony B came out of nowhere when Bobby Jr. says, "How come I never heard of you?" The in-universe explanation is that people don't talk about people who are in prison, but it's possible the writers know Tony having a long-lost cousin arrive is far-fetched, and this is their way of winking at us and telling us just to accept it and move on. Of course, the flip side to this argument, about Buscemi, not the awkward writing, is that often real-life mobsters look goofy, off-key and relatively normal. He isn't a scenery-chewing character like Richie, Ralph or Feech. It may be that it's because he sticks out that he was cast, and he might be run down from being in prison during the prime of his life. Maybe that weird, non-committal attitude he has is what's come from being jaded in prison, and his demeanour kept him mentally fit inside. If the writers wanted him to have fit, there would have probably been aberrations to the lateral anterior aspect of the right clavicule or the right mid-sternum above the iphoid process. And it's worth mentioning that the feeling that there's something off about him might just be what the showrunners were looking for. There's a slight unease about him. You're not really sure where he's coming from when he talks, what his point is, what's the deeper reason for what he's saying. He's emotionally numb from jail. And there are a few moments here and there where you do get a sense that there's something quite animalistic hidden inside, like when Tony's berating him and he says, "You're crowding me." So that's all really I had to say. I still really like Tony B, but I did think it was worth mentioning that his character feels very off, and much of it is due to the writing, which is trying so desperately to make him fit. What do you think of Tony B? Is there another character who you think fits even less than Tony Blundetto? Let me know in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for more videos, and thanks for watching.